The winter of 1885 descended upon the Wyoming Territory with a vengeance, burying the small town of Silver Creek under 3 feet of drifting snow. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded animal, rattling the windowpanes of the general store where the warmth of a potbelly stove fought a losing battle against the December chill. "Mylin, you're buying ribbon for the Christmas auction?" "Really?" Mylin's delicate hand stilled on the spool of crimson satin. The voice of Mrs. Halloway carried across the dry goods store, sharp and discordant, cutting through the low hum of conversation. It was loud enough for the 3 other women browsing the bolts of calico and wool to hear every syllable. "Yes, Mrs. Halloway," Mylin replied, her voice soft and accented, sounding like water flowing over smooth stones. She kept her gaze lowered, staring at the vibrant red ribbon that contrasted starkly against her pale skin. Her face burned, a flush of heat rising up her neck, but she refused to let her hands tremble. "Well," Mrs. Halloway's laugh was brittle, like ice snapping under a boot heel. "I suppose everyone is entitled to try." Even when she paused, her eye sweeping over Mylin's figure with theatrical concern that masked deep-seated disdain. "Even when the outcome is already clear. One must wonder if the town has a palate for foreign curiosities." The other women tittered behind their gloved hands, their eyes darting toward Mylin with a mixture of amusement and hostility. To them, she was an anomaly, a relic left behind by a husband who had passed too soon. Mylin paid for her ribbon, placing the coins on the counter with deliberate care. The shopkeeper took the money without meeting her eyes. She gathered her small parcel and walked out into the biting December cold. The air smelled of wood smoke and impending snow. She had made it halfway down Main Street, the wooden boardwalk slick with frost, when she heard a cry. A little girl, perhaps 6 years old with flaxen hair peeking out from a woolen bonnet, stood frozen near the muddy ruts of the road. She was staring at a scattering of peppermint sticks and ribbons she had dropped in the slush. Her mother was already 10 paces ahead, her breath puffing in the air, her voice sharp with impatience. "Sarah! Pick those up this instant. Do you know what sugar costs?" Mylin knelt, the movement fluid despite the biting cold. "It is not easy to hold so many things with small mittens," she said gently. She gathered the ribbons and the candy, wiping the mud carefully from the wrappers with her own handkerchief. She pressed them into the girl's small, gloved hands. "There you are, little one. Good as new." The girl, Sarah, looked up, her eyes wide and blue. She stared at Mylin, at the almond shape of her eyes, the raven-black hair pulled back smoothly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Sarah." The mother turned back, her face twisting when she saw who was near her daughter. She rushed forward, grabbing the child's arm and pulling her away roughly, as if Mylin carried a plague. She didn't say a word to Mylin, didn't offer a nod of thanks. She simply glared, a look of protective disgust, and dragged her daughter toward the mercantile. Mylin stood slowly, her knees aching from the cold. She brushed the slush from her skirt and continued home. She didn't make it far before she heard them. 3 young cowboys lounged outside the Rusty Spur Saloon, whiskey brave and bored, their breath misting in the frigid air. The tallest one, a man named Brody, called out as she passed. "Hey, Mrs. My. Heard you're making a basket for tonight." Mylin kept walking, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the grey sky met the white peaks. "Don't waste your time," another one laughed, leaning back against a hitching post. "Ain't nobody bidding on a basket that comes with chopsticks." Their laughter followed her all the way to the edge of town, haunting her steps like a pack of wolves. Her cabin sat at the very end of a dirt road, isolated and small, tidy in the way things become when they are all you have left to care for. It was the home Jacob had built for her. Mylin closed the heavy oak door and leaned against it, breathing hard. She made it to the rough-hewn table before the tears finally came. They weren't loud. She had learned not to cry loudly 2 years ago when Jacob died of fever, and the world decided she no longer mattered. The question burned in her chest, hot and suffocating. "Why did you leave me here, Jacob? Why did you bring me to this land of snow and stone only to leave me alone?" She touched the jade bracelet she still wore on her left wrist. Jacob had given it to her on their wedding day. He had been a trapper, a man of the mountains who saw her not as a curiosity, but as a woman. When he looked at her, his eyes had been full of something she couldn't fake, something real and warm. But now, she was just the Chinese widow, the outsider. The woman the town pitied on Sundays and forgot by Monday. My Lin wiped her face with her hands and stood. The basket supplies sat on the counter. Flour, precious sugar, ginger root, and the jar of 5-spice powder she had rationed for months. Jacob loved her cooking. He had told her once that her food could melt the coldest winter. "One more time," she whispered to the empty room. "I will try one more time." Her hands moved with fierce purpose. She did not make the biscuits and fried chicken the other women would be preparing. She made what she knew, what was true to her. She kneaded the dough for mooncakes, filling them with sweet red bean paste she had prepared days ago. She mixed flour and spices for almond cookies that smelled of home. She steamed delicate buns filled with savory pork and scallions. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, pouring every ounce of stubborn hope she had left into that basket. If they wouldn't see her worth, maybe they would taste it. By the time she finished, the sun had set, plunging the world into a blue-black darkness. She wrapped everything carefully in a beautiful red silk cloth, tied the ribbon she had bought into a careful, complex knot, and stood back. It was beautiful. It was the best work she had ever done. It wouldn't matter. She knew it wouldn't matter. But she had made it anyway because some part of her, stupid, stubborn, and still breathing, refused to disappear completely. My Lin went to her wardrobe. She bypassed the drab wool dresses the town expected a widow to wear. Instead, she reached for the garment she had been saving. It was a traditional cheongsam, cut from heavy white silk. In her culture, white was the color of mourning, of death and reverence. It was fitting for her heart, even if the town wouldn't understand. The dress was high-collared and embroidered with subtle silver thread that caught the lamplight like frost. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror by the door. She looked like a ghost, or perhaps a spirit of the snow. She was 20 years old, yet she felt 100. She picked up the basket, heavy with hours of work, and walked out into the December night. The town hall blazed with lamplight and laughter. My Lin could hear the music before she even reached the door, fiddles and a honky-tonk piano raising a storm of celebration against the silence of the winter night. She paused at the threshold, taking a breath that stung her lungs. Inside, the heat hit her like a physical wall. The room was decorated with pine boughs and holly. The other women clustered together like birds on a wire, young and lovely in their calicos and ginghams, their baskets decorated with dried flowers and lace. They laughed easily, heads bent together, sharing secrets My Lin would never be invited to hear. When she stepped fully into the light, the conversation near the door died. The white cheongsam glowed under the lanterns. It hugged her frame modestly but with elegance that was alien to Silver Creek. She stood at the edge of the room, alone with her basket. Nobody looked her in the eye. Nobody spoke. The auction would start soon. The humiliation would follow. But My Lin stayed anyway, her back straight, her chin held high. Leaving would have been the same as agreeing with every cruel thing they had ever whispered about her. And she wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. The auctioneer, a portly man named Mr. Abernathy, climbed onto the stage. His voice boomed across the hall, jovial and commanding. "All right, folks. Settle down. It's time for the main event. Let's see how generous our bachelors are feeling this chilly evening." The crowd cheered. The process began. Next basket. Miss Emily Tate's. Beautiful work here, folks. Smells like apple pie. Let's start at $3. Hand shot up. The bidding climbed fast. 5. 7. 9. A young deputy won at $12, and Emily practically floated to his side, blushing and perfect. My Lin watched from her corner. Her basket sat at her feet, growing heavier with every passing minute. For more baskets sold. Each one brought laughter, applause, and the sweet victory of being chosen. The room hummed with warmth and Christmas cheer, and the kind of belonging my Lynn had forgotten existed. Then, Mr. Abernathy lifted her basket. The room didn't go quiet. That would have been a mercy. Instead, the conversations continued as if he hadn't spoken at all. Mrs. My Lynn's basket, he held it high. The red silk wrapping was distinctive, exotic. Fine work here. Let's start it at, shall we say, $2? Silence. Not the expectant kind. The uncomfortable kind. Mrs. Halloway's voice carried from the front row, pitched just loud enough to be heard over the shuffling of feet. Probably full of rice and fish heads. Laughter rippled through the room. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. $1. More silence. Men studied their boots. Women whispered behind gloved hands. A cowboy near the back muttered to his friend, "I'd have to eat dinner with her." "No thanks. Don't speak the lingo." My Lynn's face burned, her hands clenched at her side so tightly her fingernails dug into her palms. She had known. She had known this would happen, but knowing hadn't prepared her for how it felt, like being slowly erased in front of 50 people who didn't care enough to look away. She felt the tears pricking her eyes and fought them down with everything she had. Mr. Abernathy shifted his weight. "Well, perhaps we'll just move on to $30. The room stopped. The chatter died instantly. Every head turned. A man stood at the very back of the hall, half hidden in the shadow near the heavy oak doors. He was tall, taller than anyone else in the room. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat that had seen better days, and a black Stetson pulled low. When he stepped forward, the lamplight revealed a weathered face, broad shoulders, and serious dark eyes that swept the crowd with the kind of calm that came from never needing to prove anything. My Lynn's breath caught. It was the man from the ridge. 3 months ago, in late September, she had been gathering herbs near the timberline when she had found him. He had been thrown from his horse, his leg twisted at a sickening angle, shivering from shock. She had set the bone right there on the rocks, ignoring his groans of pain, and had supported him all the way back to his remote ranch house. She had visited him for 3 days, applying poultices of ancient herbs to keep the infection out, until he was strong enough to stand. He had barely spoken then, just watched her with intense, fever-bright eyes. And now he was here. Ethan Blackwood. The lone rancher. Mr. Abernathy stammered. "That's Mr. Blackwood. That's 3 times tonight's highest bid." "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." Ethan's voice was deep, rolling like thunder in a canyon. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Mrs. My Lynn made that basket. I can tell by the care in it." He reached the front, pulled a roll of banknotes from his pocket, and counted it out. It was more money than most families in town saw in 2 months. Mrs. Halloway found her voice first. "Mr. Blackwood, surely you didn't see whose basket it was?" "It's the foreign woman's." "I saw exactly whose it was." Ethan turned, his dark eyes meeting Mrs. Halloway's with a look that made her recoil. Then, he looked at My Lynn. $30. That's my bid." He picked up the basket, handling the red silk with surprising gentleness. Then he did something that made the entire room gasp. He walked over to My Lynn and offered her his arm, bowing slightly at the waist. "Mrs. My Lynn, would you do me the honor of sharing this meal with me?" My Lynn couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She could only nod. She placed her hand on his forearm. The wool of his coat was rough against her silk sleeve. The room watched in stunned, gaping silence as they walked together to a small table in the corner, away from the prying eyes. Ethan pulled out her chair for her, a courtesy no man in this town had ever shown her. He unpacked the basket with careful hands. He lifted the lid of the container and the scent of anise, ginger, and savory pork wafted out, rich and complex. He picked up a mooncake, examining the intricate design pressed into the top. "This is..." He looked at her. "How long did this take you?" "Most of yesterday." All of today, My Lin whispered. He took a bite. He closed his eyes, chewing slowly. When he opened them again, something fierce and honest burned in his gaze. This is the best food I've had in 10 years, he said. Maybe longer. My Lin's voice trembled. You didn't have to do that. It was charity. No, Ethan said firmly. Charity is giving a dog a bone. This, he gestured to the food and then to her. This is recognizing value. This food is worth every penny. And so are you. Tears finally spilled over My Lin's lashes. She blinked them back, ashamed. You are the man from the ridge. September. The horse threw you. You remember? I remember, he said softly. I remember a woman who saved my life and asked for nothing. A woman who hiked 5 miles in the rain to make sure I didn't lose my leg. He met her eyes steadily. I don't forget kindness, My Lin. And I don't forget when someone treats me like a human being instead of a hermit or a savage. They ate in a bubble of privacy. Around them, the party tentatively resumed, though it was quieter now, watchful. Ethan set down his fork. May I call on you? Properly? My Lin's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Why? Because I'd like to know you better. Because you're the first person in this territory who didn't look at me and see a roughneck or a paycheck. He smiled, a small, rare expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. And because anyone who can make food this good deserves to be appreciated. My Lin looked at her hands, resting on the white silk of her morning dress. I am a widow. I am Chinese. The town. They do not accept this. I don't care about the town, Ethan said. I care about you. My Lin looked up. Then. Yes. You may call on me. Ethan's smile widened. Good. When the evening ended, Ethan stood and offered his hand. Thank you for a wonderful Christmas Eve, My Lin. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. He tipped his hat and left, striding out into the cold. My Lin sat alone at the table for a moment, surrounded by empty plates and the lingering scent of spices. For the first time in 2 years, the cold knot in her chest had loosened. Christmas morning came cold and bright, the sun reflecting off the snow with blinding intensity. My Lin was boiling water for tea when the knock sounded. She opened the door to find Ethan Blackwood standing there, hat in his hands, looking oddly uncertain for a man who had just spent $30 in front of half the town. Wanted to thank you again for that meal, he said. He shifted his weight. Been thinking about it all morning. Best Christmas dinner I've ever had. My Lin felt heat creep up her neck. Oh. You're welcome. I was wondering. He met her eyes. Would you be willing to make dinner for me again? I'll pay for the groceries and your time. Truth is, I'm tired of my own poor cooking. Beans and bacon get old. My Lin stared. You want to hire me? If you're willing. She should say no. The town was already whispering. This would make it worse. But looking at his earnest face, she couldn't refuse. Yes, she heard herself say. I would be glad to. 2 days later, he appeared at her door with a crate of groceries and an unusual request. I was hoping you'd teach me to make that. That filled bread. The steamed ones. Bowsy, she asked. Bless you, he joked. Yes. Those. They worked side by side in her small kitchen. Ethan's hands were too rough, too strong, meant for ropes and reins, not delicate dough. You are strangling it, My Lin said, watching him knead with grim determination. Gentle. Like this, she demonstrated, her small hands folding the dough rhythmically. Ethan tried again. The dough tore. My Lin bit her lip, but the laugh escaped anyway. Ethan looked up, startled. What? She tried to stop, but couldn't. You are kneading the dough like you are wrestling a steer. He looked at his hands, then at the mangled dough, and the corner of his mouth twitched. My Lin laughed harder. It was the first real laugh in so long it almost hurt. Years of grief cracking open. She covered her mouth, but it kept coming, helpless and bright. Ethan started chuckling. The sound was rusty, deep. "I suppose I am," he admitted. "I am sorry," Mylin gasped, wiping her eyes. "I just..." "Don't apologize," Ethan was grinning now. "At least I'm entertaining." "Very." They laughed together until the kitchen felt different. Warmer. Like something had shifted and settled into place. While the dough rose, they sat with tea. "My wife died 15 years ago," Ethan said quietly, staring into the dark liquid in his cup. "Childbirth. The baby too. I buried them on the ranch. Since then, I've just been surviving. Not living." Mylin wrapped her hands around her own cup. "My Jacob. He died 2 years ago. Fever." She paused. "He brought me here from San Francisco. He promised we would build a life. He was a good man. He did not care where I came from. He was a lucky man," Ethan said. "I used to be lively," Mylin confessed. "I used to sing. But since he died, and the town turned their backs, I forgot how." "You made me laugh today," Ethan said. "It's still in you." 3 days later, he came back with firewood. Mylin tried to protest, but he just stacked it neatly by her stove and refused payment. They didn't cook that day. They just talked. He asked about her childhood, about the festivals she missed, about the gods of her ancestors. He listened like her answers mattered. A week after Christmas, he visited again. No pretense this time. No groceries, no firewood. He just wanted to sit in her kitchen and be near her. "I'm falling for him," she realized with a jolt of terror as she watched him ride away that evening. "God help me, I am falling for him." The town was watching. She saw the curtains twitch when he rode by. She saw the glares when she went to the market. Men like Ethan Blackwood didn't end up with women like Mylin. But when he knocked on her door 2 days later, she opened it anyway. She was pulling almond cookies from the oven when the pounding started, not the polite knock of Ethan, but a heavy, demanding thud. She turned to find 3 women pushing past her into the house without invitation. Mrs. Halloway, the banker's wife Mrs. Thorne, and the mayor's sister. They stopped dead. Ethan Blackwood stood at her kitchen table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, flour dusting his dark forearms. He had been helping her roll dough. The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Mrs. Halloway recovered first, her face pinched with righteous fury. "Mr. Blackwood! You are alone with her. Unchaperoned." "I am learning to bake," Ethan said calmly, wiping his hands on a towel. "Is that a crime, Mrs. Halloway?" "It is indecent." Mrs. Thorne clutched her handbag like a shield. "The 2 of you." Repeatedly. Without supervision. With her kind. Ethan's voice dropped, quiet but with jagged edges. "Are you questioning Mrs. Mylin's honor? Or mine?" The women hesitated. "Because if you are," Ethan continued, taking a deliberate step forward, towering over them, "say it clearly. So I know who to speak to the sheriff about. Slander is a serious charge." Mrs. Halloway backpedaled. "We are simply concerned for propriety. For the moral standing of the community." "You're concerned with gossip," Ethan said, his eyes like steel. "There is a difference. Mrs. Mylin is a respectable widow. I am a respectable man. We are courting. If that offends you, the door is behind you. The whole town is talking." "Then the whole town can mind its own business," Ethan snapped. He walked to the door and held it open. "Good day, ladies." They left in a rustle of scandalized skirts and indignant huffs. When the door closed, Mylin realized she was shaking. "They will make this worse," she whispered. Ethan turned to her. "Let them. I meant what I said, I am courting you." If you'll have me. Ethan. I know, he said. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I haven't felt this alive in 15 years. But My Lin knew better. She knew how fear worked. 1 week later, Sheriff Miller knocked on her door. He held his hat in his hands, looking genuinely regretful. Mrs. My Lin, he said heavily. Town council sent me. He handed her an official-looking paper. They've issued a notice of exile. Moral disruption to community standards and a violation of the Alien Ordinance. My Lin's world tilted. They are exiling me. Council vote was unanimous. Mayor Pendergast, Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Halloway's husband. They want you out of town limits by Friday. Where will I go? I don't know. I'm sorry. It's legal. He left. My Lin stood in her doorway, staring at the paper until the English words blurred into meaningless shapes. That evening, she was packing her few belongings, her silk dresses, the jade bracelet, the few books Jacob had left her, when the door burst open. Ethan stood there, wild-eyed and breathing hard, snow melting on his shoulders. Is it true? My Lin couldn't look at him. They want me gone by Friday. This is because of me, he growled. This is because I stood up to them. This is because they hate me, she said, her voice breaking. You were just the excuse they needed. Please, Ethan. Go. Where will you go? There is a boarding house in the mining town over the pass. I will find work laundry, perhaps. No. I have no choice. Come to my ranch. That would make everything worse. They would arrest you for harboring me. I don't care. Ethan's voice rose, filling the small cabin. I don't care what they think. Well, I do. She whirled on him, tears streaming down her face. I will not be the reason you lose everything. Your land. Your standing. Your home. What good is any of it without you? The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. My Lin stared at him, her chest heaving. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan dropped to one knee on her worn wooden floor. My Lin, his voice shook. I love you. I've loved you since you dragged me off that mountain and asked for nothing in return. I've loved you through every meal, every laugh, every silence. Marry me. My Lin gasped. Not because they are forcing us, he said intensely. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Ethan. They want me gone by Friday. His eyes blazed with a fierce light. Then marry me Friday morning. Become my wife. Walk out of this town as Mrs. Blackwood, not as someone they exiled. Show them they have no power over you. Over us. They will never accept it. I don't need them to accept anything. I just need you to say yes. He took her hand, his rough thumb tracing the line of her knuckles. Do you love me? The answer rose from the depths of her soul, bypassing fear, bypassing grief. Yes. Then marry me. Let them choke on their bitterness while we build something beautiful. My Lin pulled him to his feet and kissed him, a desperate, salt-tasted kiss full of furious hope. Yes, she whispered against his mouth. Yes, I will marry you. Friday morning arrived with frost on the windows and steel in My Lin's spine. She stood in the church vestibule wearing the white cheongsam. Today, it was not for mourning. Today, it was for a wedding. She held a small bouquet of winter holly and pine. Inside, the church was half empty. The Reverend waited at the altar, a kind-faced man who believed in God more than he believed in the mayor. A handful of ranch families, friends of Ethan's who lived outside the town's influence, filled the scattered seats. Ethan stood at the altar in a pressed black suit, watching the door like she might disappear if he blinked. My Lin took a breath and stepped forward. The church doors banged open behind her. Mayor Pendergast strode in, flanked by Banker Thorne and Mr. Halloway. Their faces were red with cold and anger. This wedding cannot proceed, the mayor bellowed. The Reverend stiffened. On what grounds, Mayor? This woman is under an exile order. The mayor's voice echoed off the rafters. She has no legal right to be in town limits. Ethan walked down the aisle slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet, carrying a weight that silenced the room. She is not under exile. In 10 minutes, she will be my wife. Mrs. Blackwood will live on my ranch, 5 miles outside your precious town limits. She will be a citizen of this county by marriage. Banker Thorne stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, think carefully. The bank holds your mortgage. Your business relationships. We can pull them. Pull them, Ethan said. He didn't blink. I'll find other banks. Other partners. I'll drive my cattle to the next depot if I have to. You will be ruined. I will be married to the woman I love, Ethan said, his voice hardening. There is a difference. Mrs. Halloway appeared behind the men, her face twisted. You are throwing away your reputation for a heathen? For a woman who doesn't even belong here. Careful, Ethan warned. The word cut like a blade. He turned to address the church, the half-full pews, the council members blocking the aisle, and My Lynn standing frozen in her white silk. You measured My Lynn by her race, Ethan's voice rang clear. You measured her by her widowhood, by her difference. You found her wanting. You mocked her, exiled her, tried to erase her. He walked back to My Lynn and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. I measured her by her character. By her kindness. By her strength. The way she helped a stranger on the road and asked for nothing back. The way she makes me laugh after 15 years of forgetting how his voice softened but lost none of its power. And I found her priceless. He turned back to the council, his eyes blazing. You tried to exile the best woman in this territory. That is your loss, not mine. Now, get out of this church or stay and witness. But you will not stop this wedding. The mayor's face went purple. The bank means nothing compared to her, Ethan said. Make your choice. Stay or go. But we are getting married. Silence stretched, heavy and taut. Then, Mayor Pendergast turned on his heel and walked out. The banker followed, muttering threats. Mrs. Halloway hesitated, looked at the resolute faces of the ranchers in the pews, and left with a hiss of skirts. The doors slammed shut. Half a dozen townspeople who had been hovering outside, curious, uncertain, slipped inside and took seats. Not many, but enough. Ethan squeezed My Lynn's hand. Ready? She nodded, her throat too tight for words. They walked down the aisle together. The ceremony was simple, beautiful. The Reverend's voice was warm and certain. When it came time for vows, Ethan turned to her. I vow to see you as God sees you. Precious. Valuable. Worthy. I vow to defend you, cherish you, and remind you daily that you are enough. More than enough. My Lynn's voice shook, but rang true. I vow to love you with courage. To choose love over fear. To build a home where we are both safe. And to make you laugh every single day. You may kiss your bride. Ethan kissed her like she was air and he was drowning. The church, small and defiant, erupted in genuine applause. 1 year later. My Lynn walked into the Christmas Eve celebration on Ethan's arm. She was 6 months pregnant, glowing with health and happiness. She wore a beautiful emerald green dress, a Western style, but embroidered with Chinese silk patterns along the collar, a blend of her two worlds. The town had softened. Not all of it. Mrs. Halloway still looked away when My Lynn passed, and the mayor still scowled. But others nodded. Some even smiled. The shopkeeper greeted her by name now. My Lynn had stopped needing their approval months ago. The basket auction began. When My Lynn's basket was called, elaborate as ever, a fusion of American gingerbread and Chinese spice cakes, Ethan stood immediately. $50. The room erupted in warm laughter. My Lynn called out, her voice bright and fearless. "Ethan Blackwood, you can have my cooking for free. You are my husband." "I know," he grinned, looking at her with adoring eyes. "But I'm establishing a tradition. Every year, I bid on my wife's basket. Let's see who can top that devotion." More laughter. Genuine this time. They shared the meal at their corner table. Ethan's hand rested on her belly, feeling their child kick against his palm. "Best $50 I'll spend all year," he murmured. My Lynn kissed his cheek. "You didn't buy a basket, Ethan. You bought yourself a lifetime of sticky rice and a woman who will never let you eat cold suppers." "No," he said, his eyes serious and full of love. "I invested in something better. A home. A partner. A future." Around them, the town celebrated. Some still judged. Many had softened. A few had become true friends. But my Lynn didn't need them all anymore. She had Ethan. She had their baby coming. She had a home filled with laughter, flower dust, and the smell of spices rising in the warmth of the stove. She had her worth. And finally, she believed it.